Good evening, everyone. My name is Councilman Brewer, Councilman at Large, the chair of the Snow Plan. Um, Tonight, we want to discuss the snow plan for the city of Gary. Let me turn this down here. But before we get started there, let me introduce my colleagues that's here. We have President Godwin, First District Councilman, President of the Gary Common Council, Councilman at Large, Mike Brown, Councilwoman Ty Atkins of the 4th District, Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell of the 5th District, Councilman Dwight Williams of the 6th District. Is there any other council members on at this time? I see our city attorney is on, Mr. Pohl is on, our Mayor Jerome Prince is on also. I see Domingo is on from GSD. And Councilwoman Mary Brown. All right. So I recall right before the weather hit, and we pretty much still in the fall season, where we discussed the snow plan, and all council members should have gotten a at the snow plan. I want to have this meeting so that way we could bring the public up to speed on where we're at with the snow plan and take the public through the snow plan also. I received several calls about issues with snow and things of that nature. Where side streets was the calls that I got a lot about the side streets, and a lot in particular I get them all the time about the alleys, the people that's parked on the snow routes that we required them to remove from the snow routes, but their complaint is that they get blocked inside of their homes where they're not able to leave from the alleys, because we know the alleys are pretty much third tier on our snow removal plan. So I do have a great concern about the ones that's on the snow route and the alleys being plowed, so that way they can be able to maneuver at the same time, because we are requesting that they move off of the snow route. And we appreciate that they do comply with us, but it does put them at an inconvenience when they can comply with us, and then they're forced to be locked inside their homes and not able to move around. So I don't know who will start us off. I don't see Rachel on from GSD. Mayor, would you start us off at this time, please?
Sure, Councilman. So myself and Deputy Mayor McCain will be on this evening. I believe we could probably address most questions that are posed this evening. I want to just take a second to thank you and the council for convening this, certainly to give an update, but always to share as much information as we can with the residents. And so, I guess before we begin, and as I said, I'm prepared to answer any questions relative to, the recent snow event, but I think we have to put this in a proper context. And so, and it's not to offer excuses, like yourself and probably all of the council members and anybody who would listen, right, including the administration or anyone who works for the city. I'm sure that we all fielded multiple calls over the last 7 days or so. And to some extent, the calls still come because people want to be able to traverse their streets or alleyways, or if it's a driveway, everyone's concern is relative to, first, their immediate needs, but I'm just going to assume that everyone's concerned about the city at large. And so to that extent, I want to mark a couple specific, I think, relevant points is, as we know, we had extreme weather conditions, unlike any that we've seen since, if I'm correct, 1979. Although I'm a little skeptical and have a different opinion about that. I specifically remember a snow event in late March that was somewhere right around 2004 or so. But even that one didn't compare to what we just experienced. And so when you think about the record snowfall and the sustained low temperatures, as well as a inferior fleet of vehicles, I think that it presented, in fact, I'm certain that it presented conditions that had previously been manageable with the recent snow events, and certainly ones that occurred even last year. And so to that point, I'm pleased to say that there is a snow plan in place. It's the one that was shared with you. But also, I'll point back to the factors that I mentioned. When you have conditions like that, it certainly requires an alteration or an adjustment in the plan. And that's exactly what we experienced over the last 7 days.
So, Mayor, can you give us a count of what we have in stock far as equipment on hand at this time?
Sure, I'm going to have to refer to some notes for that. Unfortunately, I just don't remember verbatim, but I also intend to share this in document form with the council so that you are aware of what we have. Let's see
Mayor,
here.
I have that information handy if you need me to read it off.
Yeah, why don't you, sir? That'll save
Okay.
us a little time anyway. Thank you.
Sure. At the beginning of the season, General Services started off with the entire fleet operational of 13 trucks. The older fleet requires constant maintenance. The fleet was severely impacted by the deep freeze and the 24-hour-a-day usage during the weather event. We had 4 heavy-duty trucks, 4 medium-duty trucks known as 550s, and these were fraught since the acquisition due to electric and hydraulic spinners or versus hydraulic spinners that have required constant repairs. And then we had 5 pickup trucks, which are Ford 250s. By the time we had experienced the climax of the snow event and we had accumulated 20 plus inches, and just so the council knows, according to the National Weather Service, Gary received more accumulation than any other entity in Northwest Indiana. Hammond had 9.5 inches. There were, like Maryville had 7.5, but according to the National Weather Service, we peaked at over 20 inches. When those 3 heavy-duty trucks went down, that's the double tandem trucks, we were left with 1 double tandem truck, and we purchased a new double tandem truck on an emergency basis. And that was ratified last Wednesday before the Board of Public Works.
Councilman or Mr. Chairman, if I could add to what Deputy Mayor just added. So everything that he said is accurate relative to the equipment, but also what sort of exacerbated the issue is that in addition to us, Gary, as a city, receiving substantially more snow than probably all of our outlying areas, also when you couple the lake effect snow that occurred and the drifts, it only exacerbated the problem that much more. And if you add to that the terrain in the Miller area, it makes it slightly more challenging. And so while there is a plan, and it's, you know, the plan that's probably been used for years with some enhancements, you know, when you have conditions that were identified and you couple that with the equipment that we have, it often calls for adjustments in the plan. And so In the instance of, let's say, main streets, the plan calls for those to be cleared, completely cleared, within 24 hours after the snow stops. As you know, we had a continuous snow event, but because of the conditions that existed and the massive amounts on the lakefront, that certainly created a situation where we had to make adjustments. In addition to that, as you know, a lot of our trash is picked up in the alley. And to that point, the alleys, even though it's the tertiary area or the third prong of the snow attack or plan, those had to be bumped up to the second tier to allow for garbage collection and the access or the ability of utility trucks to access those thoroughways that I spoke of, alleys, namely.
Well, I want to go back into our September, I think it was September meeting that we had about the snow plan and about the equipment. At that time, it was stated to us during the snow plan meeting that our equipment was okay, we can make it through the winter, and that was one of my main reasons for having that meeting, because I know we used pretty much all that equipment during the summertime. We're doing removal of debris and stuff throughout, and we try and retrofit that same equipment to do snow. And I had great concerns at that time, but I was assured that we was fine, we could make it through, because I know we was coming up during budget time, and no discussions was even given about any equipment possible that we would need for general service at all. Matter of fact, nothing was even in our budget, discussing about major purchases for general service and equipment.
Yeah, Councilman, you raise a good point. And I mean this as sincerely as possible. At that particular time, we were basically operating, as we typically do, and anticipating certainly not the volume of snow and the extreme cold conditions that we experience. And so, as I said, prior to this event, that equipment, even though, in some instances inadequate, were certainly at that particular time expected to suffice any snow event or any normal snow event that we would have experienced. I also want to point out that part of that assumption, right, was done or made with full knowledge that the prior acquisition of snow equipment, namely spreaders and smaller trucks, it was well aware, based on previous history and experiences, that those often require repairs because of the parts, like Deputy Mayor mentioned, the electrical systems and, in some instances, hydraulic spinners. But when you add severe temperatures, and I'm just going to separate that from the snow, that only exacerbates the conditions of those equipment and certainly creates situations that unfortunately are unpredictable and unforeseeable.
So what is the plan going forward? I have to say, this is the first time I heard about 20 inches of snow that we received. I heard slightly that we had a little bit more, but never heard the term 20 inches of snow. So what is the plan going forward to make sure that we're on top of this? I'll just wait for your response from there.
Sure. So, yeah, I've heard various assessments of how much actually accumulated. I believe it was pretty close to 20 inches in some areas. If I take my personal experiences of shoveling, for myself and some others, I was as engaged as I'm sure you were, and perhaps some other council members. But yeah, a significant amount of snow. But the plan moving forward is to shore up our resources first of all, and so that we aren't caught in a situation again, regardless of the amount of snow that accumulates. We want to be as prepared as we possibly can be. And so, as was mentioned, we purchased one double tandem truck already, and we're able to secure financing for an additional two, and those are the larger trucks. In addition to that, we've spoken with a number of people, and our Public Works Department has collaborated with some entities who have offered their services, whether it be physical or in equipment, to better prepare us. But to be certain, I think the thing that I glean most out of this is that, as painful as it may be, sometimes you have to buckle down and make the capital investments necessary. And to that extent, we look for ways immediately to begin that, and in some regards have been successful. So I would say that we're certainly better prepared than we were before, and we certainly have learned some lessons from that, and we'll be prepared to address the next major snow event. Fortunately, the forecast suggests that the weather is warming up, and so simultaneously we're preparing for things like the potholes that are certainly going to surface, as well as making plans for street paving this season.
And I'll ask a few more questions and I'll open up to my colleagues. So
Yep.
you may mention that we made one purchase of one truck. Is that true that we made a purchase of 180,000 for one truck?
It's absolutely accurate. Yes, sir.
What is the normal price for a truck of that nature if you're not buying it instead of peak season?
Councilman, you broke up a little bit, but I believe you asked what's the normal or average price of a piece of equipment like that
Outside of peak season?
outside of peak season.
Yes.
I'm not prepared to answer the question relative to particular seasons, but it's my understanding that that is the average price of a piece of equipment. I've talked to several entities, Lake County Highway, as well as Teamsters Union, which will be visiting their shop because they actually offered a couple of other recommendations that we could use to, equip some of the equipment, or to better equip some of the vehicles that we have in an effort to address it even more. But yeah, that seems to be the average price. So it starts somewhere right around 120,000, but that's just a plain truck that's not equipped with all of the necessary components that it needs to address the snow. And as was pointed out clearly several times throughout this event, you can certainly try to plow, and to the credit of our general services employees, I think they did a great job considering the equipment they have. But to do a more effective job, certainly need adequate equipment, and that's what we're pursuing.
So that is a brand new truck then, correct?
Yes, sir.
So is there a full assessment that's been done with the General Service Department? And we're just talking about snow at this time here. I know we're going to start talking about grass and different equipment they need for picking up debris also. Have we looked at what it will cost to get adequate equipment to do a fine job inside the city of removing snow? What does that sticker price look like?
I'm experiencing, and maybe it's on my end, but the audio isn't necessarily to the point where I could hear the entire question. If you don't mind, would you try to repeat it again, please?
Okay, I'm gonna come up with your piece. What does the sticker price look like to replace the entire fleet It's bad.
Yeah, he's saying, what is the sticker price to adequately have an adequate fleet to cover snow removal? So what I know, I saw that Councilman Williams has made a proposal that he may want to share with us about 9 vehicles, and I saw the article today. But I guess trying to say, what would be that big picture cost?
So unfortunately, I don't have that answer for us now. I did speak with Councilman Williams about his proposal, and I appreciated it and was thankful that he submitted a plan. I think, and he can certainly speak to it better than I can, what his specific proposal was. But I'm almost certain, if I recall the conversation accurately, that his suggestion included having one of the larger trucks, one of the $180,000 trucks per district. And what I shared with him is, while that would be an ideal situation, certainly reducing the wear and tear on vehicles having to traverse the entire city. At this particular time, we were taking an alternative route towards being able to purchase equipment and adequate equipment to address our concerns. And so that's it. But today, I don't have, in fact, I'm not even certain if that full assessment has been performed yet in terms of what it would actually cost to have every piece of equipment that we would ideally would like to have.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open up to my colleagues. Any council member at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Godwin?
thank you, Mayor Prince, for being here today. I look forward to this conversation. I know that we all received a ton of calls, and I happen to have the district that's probably one of the most difficult in terms of the hills. I look at some of those hills, and they're scary to go down when there's no snow. And so with the snow and ice, freezing temperatures, we certainly recognize and appreciate the work of our men and women in the General Services Department. I do have some questions about our readiness, about our capacity, about our equipment. I want to start with the heavy duty trucks. So there are 4 heavy duty trucks, and now there are 5. Is that what we're saying? Is that correct? Okay, so there are 5 heavy duty trucks. What is the staffing? Wait, was that? Okay.
So actually I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Councilman. Well, I was just going to share that there's 4 heavy duty trucks now, and that includes the one that was recently purchased as well as the other older fleet. There's 4 medium duty trucks, also known as 550s. Those are the ones that, when I spoke about them being fraught with issues relative to electrical and hydraulic issues since the purchase, and that's not something that I'm speculating on. That's what was shared with me through personnel at General Services as well as the Director of Public Works. But in addition to that, there's 5 F-250s now, and I apologize, I forgot the latter part of your question.
So there's 4 heavy duty trucks, including the new one that was purchased. Okay. So with that, what is I'm getting some feedback, Councilman Brewer. Okay, thank you. With that, what is the vehicle maintenance plan? So I know there are some folks who used to do this who no longer work for the city. And I guess I want to make sure that those who are currently in vehicle maintenance, are they up to speed in terms of being able to repair these vehicles? So we were saying that 3 of these 4 are inadequate or are not working. Is that what happened during the snow event, correct?
That is accurate. And so in terms of vehicle maintenance, we're absolutely working on a comprehensive maintenance plan, not only for snow equipment, but for all equipment. And certainly don't want to disparage the efforts of those who proceeded. And for the most part, most of the personnel are down there. There was one gentleman that I recall who was, I guess, the supervisor or foreman down there. He's no longer there. But Councilman, I want to point out that, repairs are certainly good in the short run, but what we experienced, particularly with the exceptionally extreme cold weather, is that if nothing else was illustrated, there needed to be a significant or potential capital investment. We can repair. Answer your question, I believe the personnel down there are equipped to fix them, but nothing's going to suffice or supplant the real situation or the real need, and that is to have adequate equipment from the onset, and that's what we're attempting to do. But to your other point, it's great to buy new equipment, but if you don't take care of it, you'll certainly find yourself in the same situation again. And I hesitate to talk about what existed in the past, only because I don't want to seem less than genuine or sincere in my presentation today. But the point is that from what I could see, some of our problems were exacerbated by the lack of maintenance. And to that extent, we certainly full well understand that we have to have a comprehensive maintenance plan and schedule, and not only have one, ensure that it's being adhered to.
Right. And so I think along those lines, it's so important that whoever's doing vehicle maintenance, that they're involved with these purchases, that they're familiar with the vehicles. I don't know, some of these I'm sure are very specific. Some of the parts are very specific, probably hard to get. And so if there are common issues with the parts, or common ones that are breaking down, or common maneuvers that are not functioning, it would seem that training in that regard would be helpful, because even the new equipment, right, is going to eventually, maybe even next season or this season, have issues. And there needs to be a way in which to rapidly repair those and to bring those back online. In order to continue to function. I did want to ask about the status of the salt. So I did not see a ton of salting. I know there was salt put down, but that was certainly one of the concerns and complaints in my area when the deep freeze began, because you're then on your ice skating, right? Once that water, once the temperature goes up, then goes back down. So what is the status of our salt reserves, and do we have sufficient salt on balance for the rest of the season?
Sure, I'll answer the latter part of your question first. We absolutely have an adequate supply of salt and have maintained that throughout the season. That's something that we're fortunate to have. As you are probably aware, and it doesn't take much to kind of understand that in certain temperatures the salt is virtually ineffective, and but in most instances you still have to apply it to help with the traction, and certainly to help expedite the melting process of it. But in this instance, and I want to point back to the trucks that we spoke about that experienced electrical and hydraulic issues. Those were the equipment that had spreaders, and to that point, when you introduced the temperatures that we had, it absolutely rendered those completely useless. And so that was probably more of an issue with the salt situation versus not having salt. But we're certainly adequately supplied with salt and are equipped to do so, or have access to it. For salt's typically purchased, or the agreements made well in advance at the beginning of the year, and based on the experience of the personnel that you spoke about, I believe they made sufficient forecasts and predictions for the amount of salt, and we haven't run out. So yes, sir.
Good. The other thing I wanted to ask about was the use of contractors. I know that sometimes in the past, what has happened is at the beginning of the season in November, anybody who has a plow, right, private contractor, neighbors, et cetera, were kind of corralled, and so that they could then be, in the moment of crisis, easily connected with and to help eradicate the problem, because there's just no way that we could cover 400 miles. And I want to specifically thank Rachel. We had a couple calls even before the big snow events with folks who were on streets that had medical emergencies and couldn't get down hills. And so she was able to dispatch people to those areas. But it seems that we needed as many independent trucks as possible to help bring up the slack, and to make sure that there's GPS tracking or some kind of way in which we can know where these trucks are, and maybe some of them going together to be able to adequately cover those side streets especially. So I think this, my question is the extent to which we are engaging everybody, right, who can legitimately plow in order to help us meet the challenge.
Mayor,
Yeah,
can I address this one and then you
Sure.
can add on anything?
absolutely.
As the president of the Board of Public Works, I'm intimately familiar with this particular area of questioning, and that is to be a contractor to do snow removal and snow plowing in the city of Gary. You have to go to the Board of Public Works office and pick up a packet. And once you go through the vetting and application process, once you've shown that you have a certificate of insurance that is adequate enough to cover the city for liability, you have to name the city of Gary as an additional insured on the policy, and you have to also abide by other requirements to be a contractor on call. We have fully utilized those contractors that sign up and get a packet. And we've also approved contracts for other contractors that may have 6 trucks, like Monte's Trucking Company, I believe, has about 6 trucks in its fleet, Councilman Godwin, but some of them only had 1 or 2 trucks. So we did engage those smaller firms to help us. But as you can imagine, with the level of snowfall that we received in a 48-hour period, they too were overtaxed. So we used a company out of Valparaiso, GE Marshall, that had the double tandem trucks that we were in so desperate need of. They had a fleet of them. So we engaged them at a cost of $20,000 in order to help us meet the needs of covering the 400 miles of road. We were also the beneficiary of the help of Commissioner Allen and Lake County to cover 53rd and Harrison north to Ridge Road, 47th, 41st, and 45th Avenues from Grant Street east to Broadway. So that helped our efforts as well, at least on the west side of town. They would not go past the Broadway for understandable reasons. So we were able to take our lesser crew and concentrate on the other 3 quadrants left in the city. So that is the status of the contractors. But, and we also, I can give this announcement, we also received the benefit of donations. I'll give you an example. Hassey Construction out of Calumet City, Illinois, donated 80 hours of a front loader for us to help us attack the alleys. We cannot take a double tandem truck and plow the alleys, nor can we really use a F-250 because they have oftentimes gotten stuck in that terrain and been unable to push through the entire length of the alley. So those front loaders are best for that. You have a front loader getting picking up the snow, and then it's putting it on a truck that's leading it and or behind it, and that's how they do that. So that is the status of our contractors. And Mayor, you may have something else additional to add.
Well, I mean, the only thing I could probably add to that, and thank you for that portion of the presentation, is specific numbers. I do know that at the beginning of the season, Public Works contracted with 4 snowplow contractors, and once we experienced the weather event that we recently had, there was an additional emergency contractor brought on, and so that would be the extent of the contractor use. But the deputy mayor pointed out Hassey Construction. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize some of the other people who once called, certainly stepped up to the plate and volunteered in certain instances to help some of the seniors. One being Pastor Eric Boone. There were a couple of others. Right now, the names escape me, but as he pointed out,
Gary Fire Department.
Yeah.
Gary Fire Department, Park Department, of course, General Services, Lake County Commissioner Allen certainly helped to activate the Highway Department out there. And so we reached out to a number of people to assist, in this extreme weather event.
Let me just ask, thank you so much, very comprehensive answer. I will just ask briefly, was there a response by the governor to the request for the declaration of a state of emergency? And then I'll just make a statement, and that is there I guess it's a question too, but is there a way in which we can kind of get, I guess, more rapid communications via television? I know in the past that has been done, where the executive is at the General Services Department, or there's some way in which we can kind of have a public awareness, if you will, with residents, so they can kind of have some sense of where things are or where the city is in the process. A lot of us are on social media, and we often think that is an effective way, but we know most of our residents are not on social media, but they do watch Channel 4. And so that is just a suggestion in the future of maybe Channel 4 and maybe the radio station could be used a little bit more to just give people a sense of where we are and what's happening around the city. Thank you.
Yeah, so Councilman, I'm going to ask that you repeat the first part of the question, but the latter point was well taken and will certainly be addressed. I made a note of that as well. But what was the question that you actually had relative to this? I missed it.
Yeah, did the governor give a response to the request for a state of emergency?
He did almost immediately. His executive assistant or his person, and I don't know what his title is, reached out within 24 hours. He had the conversation with the governor, and to that extent, they weren't inclined to, at that point, execute or initiate and state or declare, a state of emergency. But what did happen subsequently to that is several other staff members of the governor's office reached out with other suggestions, and in fact, we had a meeting today with a person from downstate, drove all the way down to sort of take a look at some of the issues that we were talking about, and has pledged, future assistance in any way that they possibly can. But the short answer is they did reach back out and weren't inclined to do so.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Any other Councilman Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did, and I want to thank the administration for the help. They have provided us with the new, with new vehicles. I stated in the article press release that I remember a day when we had 2 trucks per district, and we had a total of 9 trucks to help with the overflow. 3 additional trucks, I should say. I don't know if the city can get back to that point. I would like to see us get back to that point, but currently, I think General Service did the best job they could with helping us to relieve ourselves from this problem. I also feel that I think the residents in the 6th district, because I had several residents come out with their own personal vehicles. They have plow trucks on, And we hit alleys, church parking lots, and everything else. We were busy from say 11 o'clock until 7 o'clock that night. I know that we would all like to find a quick fix for this, but we do have 3 trucks coming in, correct, Mayor? Mayor?
Yes, one with 2 more,
With 2 more to follow
I thought it
soon.
was on mute. Yeah, one that we've already secured with the intentions of securing 2 more. Yes, sir.
I do feel that we should look at our contractors a little bit more tightly, make sure that they stay on route on plans with us. The freezing was amazing how fast this hit us. The streets froze literally overnight, which made everything pretty hard. So I know everyone's probably upset. I'm upset about it too, but I think we handled it pretty well.
So Councilman, thank you for your points. Thank you again for submitting, at least some suggestions for a plan. I wish I could say perfect scenario that everything was, just perfect. But obviously we all know that it wasn't, just based on the calls that we all received. But to that point, I just have to point out, including one correspondence that we received today, there was the other end of the spectrum. There were a lot of residents, as you suggested, who pitched in, didn't call, didn't complain, just got out there and did it. And to that extent, every time that one of you relayed a concern to General Services or myself or anybody from the administration related to Foreman Stone or Foreman Hutch or Rachel in that manner, I believe that they responded as quickly as they can, sometimes even going back multiple times because the snow just kept coming. And so to that end, we also received a lot of thank yous from the citizens. And, in a situation like that where, our crews were working 24 hours around the clock and 12-hour shifts, I think one of the Councilman Godwin, had a question as to what is our proper or what is our current staff, and I guess I should say there were 25 personnel from General Services out on the road, split up in 2 different 12-hour shifts. And at one point, they were going for 48, almost 72 hours before they actually took a break. And once things sort of let up a little bit, I remember having a specific conversation where they were requesting to get off at 9 or 11 o'clock that evening, only to prepare for the next snow event, which was expected to come at 9 a.m. the next morning. And so, like you, I think that they certainly deserve a significant and very special, sincere acknowledgement. But to everyone's point, there's always opportunity for improvement, and that's what we're looking towards to do.
We did use the payloaders to clear the alleys, right?
Yes, sir. Payloaders, front loaders, if you will. That's one of the things that, and we do use some of them, but I'll be visiting, as well as the director of public works, visiting the, I forget which local it is, but they invited us out to see how they approach it. And one of the things that they purchased some very special blades to attach to the front loaders, which should be ideal for alley conditions or mostly parking lots and that, which will essentially free up the other equipment to hit the other areas. And so again, I think we've learned a lot, through this. Certainly the first significant snow event that, I've been at the helm for. And to that extent, just fortunate to have the experienced personnel that we did, who addressed it and didn't complain not once. And want to thank Councilman Weatherspoon. He and I actually overlapped. I believe it was about after the first 36 hours, we both overlapped to, try to give the men and women some additional encouragement and just provide some sustenance for them. So Councilman Weatherspoon, I don't know if he's here or not, but thank you. And I'm sure they thanked him for the food that he brought over as well.
Yeah, I've been in conversation with Rachel Caesar, General Services, since the first snowfall was in January. And we've been sitting back trying to figure out how we could correct the situation because we knew it was going to get worse. But
Yes, sir.
I'm really think the citizens, we did the best we could. I'm glad we have the new equipment. I would like to see more equipment purchased for future notice. We are entering March, and this is the melt season. So I think what we need to prepare ourselves now is for the flooding.
Councilman, I have just one slightly different perspective, and so you know, perhaps I'm my own worst critic, but you know, I think that they did a superior job.
Yes.
But in terms of doing the best that I could, I you know, just always defer to the fact that there's always room for improvement, and to that extent, that's what I'm looking towards, you know, as opportunities to get even better at, you know, what we did. And so, you know, I believe we'll get there.
I agree. I agree. I know the residents in Glen Park on the east side are really concerned about the snow melting and their homes flooding, especially off of Georgia. And
Yes, sir.
so I'll be meeting with them to discuss that, what we could do. The last bad flood we had in that area, we looked at possible solutions from FEMA. So.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, there's flooding concerns, you know, in several areas of the city. In fact, I spoke with the gentleman, Mr. Dunlap. You know, I'm sure most of us are familiar with him, who runs the Ambridge Center over there. But he states that they have been experiencing flooding issues over there already, and I'm only certain that that'll be enhanced by this latest snow event. So it's something that we're definitely thinking about, and I'll be talking to all the appropriate personnel to see whatever it is that we can do to address it and make sure that we respond, you know, in an appropriate fashion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ask about the warming center since you mentioned that. I know I had
Yes, sir.
a couple of residents ask about the prevalence of warming centers, which is a cold issue, not so much a snow issue. But we only had one open, and I just want to encourage, and that's not necessarily centrally located, if it's possible to have at least 2 other sites, and the information on those to be a little bit more public, in terms of on the website or somewhere, and maybe the police officers who are on patrol know. But I got questions about, you know, do we have warming centers? I was afraid to post anything because there was one list of about 4 or 5 places, including Glen Ryan Pavilion in my district, at least at one point, that was sent to me. Then I found out it was only an Ambridge Man Center, I believe. And so hopefully we won't have too much more freezing weather, but I think we should look at having at least 3 sites, and that information readily available, because I don't want to share anything that's inaccurate. So I just wanted to
Sure.
put that out
So Councilman, again, that's an area certainly where improvement can be had, but you know, to be specifically pointed in this regard, there were actually multiple centers. The one that you're speaking about, and so there's a collaboration between other entities as well, and you know, we try to disseminate that information. I was almost certain it was on the website, but I could be mistaken. I'll certainly take a look. But the one that you speak of is an overnight center. And in terms of the location, there was a process in place by which anyone who wanted to get to that center could. They could simply get on one of our public transportations on any particular route and give a specific code, and they would be taken to that particular center for free.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Atkins, did you have
Thank you,
anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had 2 questions, and I'm going to direct my questions to Attorney McCain, because I think he might have them more detailed with his position on the Board of Works. So Attorney McCain, my first question is related to the information that you provided on the contractors. Just for public knowledge, I wanted to know if the contractor application process, is it a rolling process that we have in terms of we're accepting, and this is just to be proactive, right, for next season? Or is there a specific time period that we receive applications and process them?
It is a rolling application process. If you are a person with a truck with a blade on it, you can go to the Public Works office, fill out a form that's right there on the front desk as you walk in, and you will be given a packet. It will be up to you to submit that packet once you have all that information that it is requesting and requiring. Then after the packet is reviewed and vetted, you will receive a yay or a nay that you are a contractor with the city of Gary. And then the Department of Public Works, either through Ms. Morgan Caesar or through Ms. Barber, or maybe even one of the foremen, will call you and tell you, we need you to go to District 4, this quadrant, and clean those streets. So they are given an assignment. I know that, I think it was President Godwin that mentioned whether or not these contractors are equipped with GPS so we know where they are. I cannot answer that question per se, but I do know that they are given an assignment of a particular quadrant or area, and then that's what they're responsible for doing unless and until they receive word from the foreman that there's an additional area that we would like them to cover. Then they are paid per hour.
Attorney McCain, is there a reapplication process on an annual basis, or once you are approved as a contractor, are you called back, in perpetuity?
I'm going to write that one down, Councilwoman Atkins. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I will find out tomorrow and let you know, or if not sooner.
Okay, I appreciate that. The next question or comment that I wanted to make for some feedback, the alleyways on the east side, we kind of had a struggle. Even as recent as this morning, is still reminiscent of a storm that we had over the last couple of weeks. I know last week we did not receive pickup of trash from Republic, mainly due to them not being able to get through the alleyways. I think for the majority of my district, we will have pickup tomorrow morning. So I just wanted to confirm if we know that Republic has resumed picking up within our city.
Yes, they have resumed pickup. Part of the issue with last Tuesday was not just the impassability of the alleys, but the lift station itself, the transfer station itself on 15th and Clay was closed due to the inclement weather. So because of that, they were unable to take the garbage anywhere.
Got it.
It
Okay.
also was a consequence of the alleyway, but that was not the
The
primary cause
main.
because
Got
the transfer station itself was closed.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Attorney McCain.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Brown.
good evening, everyone. Mayor, I want to thank you and Deputy Mayor for getting us up to speed on what's going on. Councilman Williams, I want to thank you for the article in the paper regarding the vehicles we may need. Let me say this, that as a council, we have a strong responsibility to try to help work with the administration to get the equipment that's necessary. The administration has a responsibility to have qualified people to work the equipment. So I know there's some questions about how many employees have CDLs and what kind of equipment that we do have. But I think, some of the questions that my fellow council people are asking, I think we need to educate ourselves about some of these things, about the equipment, the cost. And I know I've only been on the council for a couple of years, but I think it's important for all of us to get up to speed and get our city where it needs to be, because when I read the Times article about one truck, I was thinking about the residents and anxieties that they may have, because we know that there are going to be contractors And we knew some of the residents would take it upon themselves to try to do what they need to do. And so I did call Commissioner Allen. I had a great conversation with him. I called the deputy mayor and spoke with him. And I drove my personal vehicle around the city because I have an all-wheel drive SUV. And I saw those trucks working. I saw the main streets getting cleared as often as they could be, all the way up to Sunday night when I was out Sunday night driving around. And I must say, it's extremely important for us to work together to get all the equipment that we need, get the proper training that we need. It's great to have some of the contractors, but it's also great. I think someone had a question about multi-use on the vehicles, because we definitely need to use them year round, you know, when we're picking up trees and, you know, other storms that are going to occur. But I want to compliment the administration and all the departments and the citizens for doing what they've done, because I remember the storm of 79 and I remember the storm of 67. Both of them were brutal. This was a brutal storm, okay? And everywhere you look, whether it was here or Texas, it was like an anomaly. It's something that wasn't normal. And I think under the conditions, we've done well. But as a council, we need to make sure we work to get more equipment, more training for the staff that we do have. So when these things occur, you know, we don't have to have so many questions, and our residents don't have to have so many anxieties, because the idea of having 9 trucks, 1 per district and 3 to just kind of rotate, that's a great idea. But at the same time, having the right contractors, that's a good idea too. So I feel that moving forward as a council, I would like for us to do everything we can, because our constituents asking the questions to us, we're on the front line. They're going to ask us the question before we can talk to the deputy mayor or the department heads. So we need to be educated about some of these things, not just ask them, you know, do we have this, do we have that, you know, find out, you know, that's what, educate ourselves. And I know there are things called retreats where we can all get together, and even through the social media with the Zoom, we may have to go in that direction. We may need a facilitator to get us where we need to be. But if we don't do what we need to do, become better as a council and work for the good of the entire city, you know, we just having meetings. That's all we're doing. So we've got to move forward and work together. That's my position on it, because I'm going to always try to do everything I can to work, period, no matter who the administration is, no matter what's going on, because the bottom line is the voters voted for you in your district. They voted for you for citywide. They voted for you for one reason, because they expect you to look out for the best interests of them when they cannot. And we have that responsibility, and we all need to continue to work together to get these things done. And I think the snowstorm was a real good example of the importance of us working together. And I really, man, I want to thank you, Deputy Mayor, because whenever I called him, I know they put the article in the nosy. When that's your friend, hey, he's a good man. He gets the job done. If I ask him a question, he does the best to get back with me. And that's all I really want, because I call Councilman Brewer a lot. He and I talk on a regular basis as well. So for me, I just think that we need to continue to work and get things done. I want to congratulate Attorney Poe on your position. All right. And I think it's important for us as a council, again, to do what we need to do. I've been around for a while, as you know, and I plan on being around a little while longer. But while I'm here, I'm going to do everything in my power for us to have peace, harmony, and work together for our community. Because people look at Gary, and the way they look at us is based on the leadership and how we perform together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, my fellow councilmen. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you.
Welcome, Councilman Brown. Councilwoman Caldwell, would you like to add anything?
You're muted.
You're muted at this time.
Uh,
There you go.
well, I know it was brutal storm, as Councilman Brown said, and I was I only had a few calls, not a whole lot, but they were serious calls where people were missing dialysis appointments and whatnot. And I have a good relationship with Keith Stone and Rachel Caesar, and we communicate often. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So I have one question. Um, the purchase of some other vehicles for the administration. Did we purchase 4 vehicles?
And what department?
Councilwoman, I'm not sure to what you're referring.
Um, Miss Barber, um, Vanessa. I can't remember Vanessa's name. Did they get vehicles?
No,
No?
ma'am.
Okay, okay. I was told that, and I was just wondering why. And Deputy Mayor McCain, thank you for the information on the rentals. But I was just curious about, we were going to rent those, but we couldn't get down the alleys to do the surveys that the code enforcement needed to do. But I understand that their fleet was broken or whatever, and it needed to be, yeah. So thank you for that information.
Anytime. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll wrap up with a few other little comments there. I know it was asked several times about the GPS system, and that definitely saves us, all of us, a lot in knowing exactly where everyone is at. I do know we used it in previous snow removals with contractors as well as city workers. And I know we might not have the answer today, but I would like to know, are we still using the GPS system in general?
Councilman, I'm fairly certain that that's still activated and in use. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so one request that I did put in September about contractors, and I think it helps, especially the public, to see who is who out there on the streets, to make sure that they have the proper signage, that they're letting the public know that they are contractors for the city of Gary, at the time, that where people can see, not just trucks running up and down the street, that that these people are assigned to the area. So we don't have the GPS. One GPS that we can't get away from is the residents always looking, and will definitely bring us in account of what's taking place and what's not taking place by individuals.
Good point, Councilman. Thank you.
Okay. And my final question is, how are we going to pay for these vehicles?
So, Councilman, I don't have this specific answer. Perhaps Deputy Mayor can chime in, but it's my understanding that we sought financing and were ultimately able to achieve that. And so that's the short version of the answer, but we'll provide a full report for you in this committee or for the entire council as well.
Okay. Are we open to the suggestions that was made by Councilman Williams with the sale of certain properties to possibly use those revenues coming in to make sure that we can put adequate fleet in general service?
Yes. So ultimately, the short answer there is yes. It looks like Deputy Mayor wanted to chime in, but yes. And so until we actually receive it, I obviously can't speak to any degree of specificity, but that is the ultimate goal. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I'll just say, the mayor said yes, and I'll say also and no, because there are certain pieces of property that are located in different areas. I'll give you an example. Edison is located in the airport development zone. Thus, that money needs to stay in the airport development zone and cannot necessarily be used for general fund purposes. However, Ivanhoe is neither in the TIF district nor the airport development zone. So when that sale is consummated, perhaps we can use some of those funds to help with these capital purchases that we've been discussing tonight.
Great point. Thank you, sir.
I do know, I believe that's Ivanhoe. That is also TIF. Also, if we're looking at it that way.
I'm not talking about Ivanhoe Gardens. I'm talking about Ivanhoe School.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Mackins.
I will ask one question for the administration, and I'm not even sure if it's feasible, but is there a way to consider possibly purchasing slightly used vehicles instead of the new for the fleet for future use?
Yeah, Councilwoman, I would say at this point, everything's on the table, but experience would suggest that, as you all suggested earlier, that when it comes to that, we definitely need to have our experienced personnel involved in that so that we don't find ourselves, in a situation. And I'm, again, not pointing fingers in that, but clearly the equipment that was purchased prior, the spreaders, right? In this instance, I guess if anyone had the opportunity to revisit that and do it over again, they probably wouldn't have purchased them, or that specific type of equipment based on its functionality in extreme weather, freezing conditions. But yeah, you make a good point there. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Domingo from GSD, would you like to chime in from your aspect of GSD participating in the snow removal?
We just been doing the same thing we did last year, concentrating in the Black Oak section of Gary and making sure Airport Road and Bird Street there is clear. And if we needed to stretch out farther west down the thoroughfares, we're always there to help.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank everyone for tuning in. I will continue to give these updates. My goal, and I know it's probably as administration, we want to get out of the rut of coming in last place or third place, or whatever place. We want to start coming to first place on some of these issues here. The public definitely expects so much from us with so little, but I think we're gonna have to bite the bullet on some of these things, and especially on snow removal. It's definitely one where we're just going to have to make a significant purchase, whatever that will be. But I would like to see that we start making plans for next year, not so much for this year. I saw on today someone's counting already down 25 days of spring. I'm looking forward to. So I want to look forward to the next winter, and I think we should start planning right now for next winter, not so much for this winter here. We're going to pray to the good Lord that he continue to bless us with the warm weather, but just in case he doesn't, we still appreciate all the hard work that our men and our women does in general service, GSD, and all of our contractors also too. But I thought it was just very important that we bring this segment to the public and let them know that we hear your concerns, but we are working to correct the problem. So thank everyone. If there's nothing else from any,
Councilman,
Councilman Caldwell?
The question I just asked about the truck, and you said you didn't know, the F-250s, it was 4 or 5 of them purchased? The
Yes.
ones with the initials JP 008-20 on it? Now, what are we using those for? Are we plowing with those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Who's driving those?
Various personnel. So especially during this event, they were alternated through personnel who were specifically using them for snow removal. As the season changes, certainly the park department will use some of them as well as general services.
Because was Eric Reeves given one?
No,
He was
No.
not?
no, ma'am.
All right. And the traffic department, they have one?
Not exactly sure, but that sounds reasonable. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Miss Barber?
The truck wasn't purchased for Miss Barber. No, ma'am.
It was, okay. But this is what, when, just as you say, when people call you and they tell you things, so I'm just asking, because I couldn't understand why Miss Barber would need a truck working in the office. And I had actually got some calls about the plows being broken. And I was like, well, will they fix them? I don't know. I said I could reach out to somebody, and then the next day I saw a few people and they had them. So the fire chief said that his mechanic in the fire department is able to fix them. So I did reach out to him and asked, would he assist with the repair of the plows? So I don't know if it happened or not. But that's all my questions. Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
that's a follow-up if I could. So
Yes.
we have 13 total trucks. And how many employees do we have of the city who are able to drive those trucks?
Councilman, I don't have an accurate number. If you talk about just general services, there are 25 personnel, but also, as I said, and as you all may be aware, some of those vehicles are used, throughout the season, certainly for parks and things of that nature. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number of how many people are driving, but equally important is that there's a full maintenance plan that's being developed. Portions of it are in effect right now because equally important as to knowing who's driving them and how they're being driven is the maintenance of them. And that's something that we've certainly tapped into and looking to do better.
Thank you. And I think to Councilman Barnes Caldwell's point, I do know it was reported on social media that a particular person did plow some streets. Now, with what vehicle that was done with, I don't know. But when that kind of stuff gets out there and so-and-so plowed my street, right? And they're not a member of General Services. I don't know whose vehicle it was, but once things hit social media, all kinds of theories begin to escalate. But I did want to say in response to Councilman Brown is that any of the questions I've asked, and I think all of us, is because, at the end of the day, while we have a funding responsibility, we legislate, and residents certainly expect us to ask questions, to know what's going on. We can't, put our head up again and imagine what the plan is. It's not done in a spirit of combat, but we are being held accountable for something that we don't run, right? And that can be a frustrating thing. No one in General Services reports to any member of the council. And so we certainly rely on yourself and the department heads and Attorney McCain and others to run the day-to-day operations. But of course, the questions come to us and the concerns come to us. And I certainly it's been great working with Rachel. I know she was very responsive with citizen concerns that I had on 2 different occasions in the past 10 days. So that I want to be clear that we only know so much. It's a big city, a lot of different things, and we're part-time. And residents do expect us to ask questions, but we can't give answers if we don't know, right? So that's why we are doing this to find out what's happening. As you can imagine, you look on Nextdoor, you look on social media, people report all kinds of things, right? That didn't happen or did happen, or vehicles they saw or didn't see. You should be using contractors, you should lease, it's endless, right? In terms of what the answer should be. But it's this kind of forum that Councilman Brewer first did last fall. I know there were some questions about why is the council doing that? Why is the council asking questions about the snow plan? And that's why, right? Because the council is who's going to get the calls. And to some extent be blamed, which is frustrating because we don't run the day-to-day operations. And I think that sometimes residents believe that we can, wave our hand and their street will instantly be paved because the councilman said so. And that's just not the case. I know some council people couldn't get out of their own streets weren't plowed. So it's an ongoing challenge, and these kinds of conversations are what I believe the citizens expect us to do. And that's a general comment. I think people say, oh, you're anti-administration because you ask questions. Well, my brain doesn't stay in my car when I enter the building. If there are issues, if there are challenges, then I'm going to use everything within me to inquire, to suggest, etc., in order to improve what's happening with the city. So I want to thank you all for taking the time. Probably will have to maybe do this again at some point, and look forward to whatever funding initiatives we can do to help make sure we have everything we need to be successful.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Ms. Harris? I'm sorry. For Ms. Harris, let me go to Councilman Brown. Then I come to you, Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. Mr. President, I greatly appreciate your input. Let me say this, that as elected officials, we do not work part-time. The moment that we're sworn in, we work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And let me also say there is not a government building that we don't have access to. We can go in at any time that that building is available. That's why we have keys to City Hall, to find out what we need to find out. I respect social media. I respect people. But sometimes we have to be very careful about all the information that's out there. I say that because there have been times I've had to have my attorney actually make the press rewrite something that was not true. So I think it's very important that before we do some of these things, that we do our homework. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. I question things, and I'm going to continue to. But I'm also going to make absolutely sure that my approach in the way that I do it is as professional as it can be, and I understand the passion and all these other things that we have. But again, the people elect us to conduct business on their behalf. So we shouldn't always have to ask questions. I think sometimes it's just like anything else. We need to study, find out what's going on. That's the reason why I suggested a retreat where we can get to know each other a little better besides just these meetings, and hash out some things as council people so we can really find out what we need to do as a group to help our city. There's nothing wrong with questions. There's nothing wrong with getting information from our citizens. What's important is a proper information. And let me say this, that if one of the city employees needed to drive a plow to plow a street, so be it, if that's what's necessary. I think what too many times we get caught in the old theory that because a person has special privileges, only their streets get paved. Those days are over. That'll get you in trouble. So I want to say to my fellow council people that I'm gonna be fair as I can be in everything we do, but I'm gonna voice my opinion based on what I know. And I encourage you to do the same thing. I'm not one to hold long meetings and have a lot of dialogue and this back and forth, but I think it's best that at this point, if this is what we need to say to clear the air, so be it. But I want to make it perfectly clear that based on the weather, based on the things that occurred, sure, there's going to be inconveniences. I looked at the news on channel 7, 2, 5, and 9, and one of the first things they said was the side streets are going to be a problem. We're going to try and attack the main streets. And that's something we need to get our citizens to understand. We're not an economically strong city right now, but the council, the administration, we have a responsibility to get us back there. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Ms. Harris, on the 411, you're muted. Ms. Harris, your microphone is muted if you're trying to talk.
I'm trying to, okay, there I go.
Yes.
So I have 3 quick questions. First, the delivery of the new trucks, how soon? And then are those snow trucks, those tandems, are they multi-use vehicles? And then the last question is, I see you haven't resolved your Zoom meeting hacks. What can you do about that? Do you have someone working on that to prevent these interruptions?
Well, I'll take the last one with the Zoom meeting. We are working internally with our IT department to make sure we try our best to stop that from happening, but these hacks are happening all over. So we're trying our best to stop that on our end. And I believe the other 2 questions for the mayor or Ms. McCain.
Mayor, I can answer that question. We
Sure.
have taken delivery of 1 new truck. We have secured potential financing for the other 2, but we have not taken delivery. We are required by law to bid out those 2 trucks because they are not an emergency purchase. Any purchase over $150,000 has to be bid out. We were able to purchase that 1 double tandem truck for $180,000 under the statute that allows for emergency purchase. And because we were down to 1 truck, because we were experiencing a 30-year snow event, or 40 years, 79 is 40 years ago, then we were able to justify that emergency purchase. The other 2 will go through the normal bidding process as required by state law.
Mhm. And what about multi-use? Do those snow trucks just sit there until needed?
No,
So-
ma'am. They are used in the spring and summer. The salt spreader is removed from the back, and then a dump apparatus can be added to the back, and it can be used for other purposes besides snow removal and snow plowing.
Yeah, and Deputy Mayor is absolutely right. The only thing I want to add to that, Jackie actually answered your question in the chat box also, in case you want to have it reiterated. But I shared exactly what the Deputy Mayor just expressed. In terms of the multi-use, he's absolutely right. With the newer equipment, the goal is to preserve that and use it, only for necessary purposes relative to the snow. The older equipment that we still have in stock and that's still part of the fleet, some of that will be used as the seasons progress as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you, Mayor. I would ask if we can possibly reconvene within the next 30 days and where we can just discuss in detail with the needs at General Service and how can we reach that goal and working together to make sure that we get the things that we all know the General Service need, as far as all the equipment outside of snow removal. We can go into pothole season. As soon as the weather break real good, pothole season, things will start growing all over the city. Dump sites, there's a number of things that General Service need. I would like to have an in-depth conversation about the needs for General Service. As I chair planning, the snow committee, I also chair the cleanup committee for the city, which last year we did not come together because the majority of the members are seniors that normally work out inside the city. But this year I would like to get that back started because there's such a great need to do a lot of cleaning inside our city, and we will see that as soon as the snow melt and the sun starts shining on the regular inside the city. But in the next 30 days, I would like to reconvene with all of us coming together and we take a deep dive inside of General Service all together. All right, is there anything else by anyone else? All right, well, I thank everyone for attending, all our listening audience for listening to us, and look forward to seeing you all at the next council meeting. Everyone have a good and safe night. God bless you.
You all also.